Bishop Barron and Dr. Jordan Peterson, take 2 on Kairos. That's what's coming up. Stay tuned. Hello friends and welcome back to Kairos. A couple of years ago, Bishop Robert Barron and Dr. Jordan Peterson had an online recorded conversation, and I offered some reflections on that video. It's been a couple of years and they've done the same again, and so I thought I'd do the same this time round. I'm not going to provide a commentary of their whole very long conversation, but just some reflections on themes arising from their conversation, which was very edifying again. I want to particularly touch on one main way in which Bishop Robert Barron challenged Jordan Peterson, and another way in which Dr. Jordan Peterson challenged Bishop Robert Barron. But just first, before we get into those two challenges, one of the ways they opened up the conversation was talking about why they're talking in the first place, because apparently they both get various requests from people that they want to see more of this. They want to see them dialoguing in public together, and they just talked a bit about why that's the case. And one of the things that Bishop Robert Barron suggested is that he sees Jordan Peterson as something of a door into religion, especially into Christianity. And at one time he even used the term gateway, and other people have talked about Jordan Peterson as a gateway drug into Christianity. I think there's something to this, and it's worth considering. I've actually experienced this, seen this with my own eyes. A number of people and young people who have come into the life of our church where I am, or have returned to the practice of the Christian faith after a time away. I'm aware that watching Jordan Peterson videos, listening to his podcast, reading his materials have been a significant part of the journey for them. Something is going on there. It's a multifaceted sort of phenomenon, I think, but people often in our time, they're living in a space where they still have some sort of an instinct, a religious instinct, a search for truth. They want to inquire about spiritual things, and yet we live in a culture where these things are so often ridiculed and sidelined and just dismissed out of hand. One of the things Jordan Peterson provides by way of his stimulating intellectual engagement with the scriptures, with his sophisticated way of talking about transcendent realities, is he simply is a bridge then. Or he removes a lot of the barriers that people have. He does open up a way, a door for people to come in to the Christian faith. And this is a fascinating phenomenon, given that Jordan Peterson himself is not an active Christian believer. It's as if he himself can't walk through that door, and yet he opens up the door for other people. As I said, I've seen this with my own eyes. Now, on to the challenges though. And it's a good segue, that comment about the door, because the main way, I think, in which Bishop Robert Barron challenged Dr. Jordan Peterson in this video was in a very similar way to how he did it a couple of years ago. Was essentially to proclaim the gospel to Jordan Peterson. He did this in a number of different ways. They had a discussion about faith and what faith actually means, and Peterson's struggles with faith, and Bishop Barron used the human analogy, thinking about a relationship with another human being, how you can reason your way to certain aspects of who they are, but ultimately they say things to you, they reveal certain truths to you about themselves, and we receive them in faith, even in a human relationship. We never know for sure whether these things are true. There's an act of faith when someone speaks to us, and he used this as an analogous way of talking about faith in God. They talked about the sacrifice of Christ on the cross, and this came up especially in discussions about the evil in the world and the suffering in the world, and Bishop Barron talked on a number of occasions about how we killed God, we human beings, and this gross manifestation of evil in the world and the killing of the Son of God, but that he was raised to life again in the resurrection. They talked about the resurrection more as well, and Bishop Barron did a good job of distinguishing this from mere myth, although there are, of course, many myths in human history which do talk about the dying and rising of various quasi-divine figures. And so Bishop Barron could engage with that, but also distinguish it and talk about the reality, the historicity, the factual nature of Christ's resurrection. I think Bishop Barron did a good job too of connecting all of this to Jordan Peterson personally. This was sort of a pastoral move on his part, because Peterson, for those of you who aren't aware, has been through tremendous and horrific suffering, both himself and in his family, the last few years. And Bishop Barron did a reasonably good job, I think, of trying to speak into this with the gospel in a personal, in a particular way. And that really did get Jordan Peterson's attention on a couple of occasions when they're talking about suffering. And yet there's always still some sort of a blockage there. You can see it before your eyes as you watch the video, or hear it as you listen in, that Dr. Jordan Peterson can go so far with these sorts of things. He can begin to hear these invitations to believe in the gospel, and yet he's just not there. But this was Bishop Barron's challenge again to Jordan Peterson in this video. But then Dr. Jordan Peterson also challenged Bishop Robert Barron in this video, and in a way which was quite helpful, especially for Christians to consider, I think. So what Dr. Jordan Peterson went on to talk about when Bishop Barron was speaking about the things I've just mentioned is he went on to say, well, what about the problem of all the young people leaving the church? What's going on there? And he basically implied that maybe the church, by all of this talk of the mercy of God and the forgiveness of God and the grace of God, maybe it's actually been too easy on people and is not asking enough of people, is not challenging people enough, is not calling them to the adventure of the spiritual life, is not calling them to take on responsibility. All these themes which are very common in Jordan Peterson's rhetoric if you know him well. Now Bishop Barron took this well, he copped it sweet, as we say here in Australia, took it on the chin, and I really think there is something to this as well. If Bishop Barron was trying to proclaim to Dr. Jordan Peterson the grace of God, what Peterson was responding with is what's sometimes called cheap grace, which goes all the way back to Dietrich Bonhoeffer. That there can be a sense in which the Christian church can proclaim these things in such a way that they give the impression there's nothing much required of people in terms of responding to this in their life in the world. Now, that's not the way it's supposed to be, but that does happen at times, and it's an interesting observation from Dr. Jordan Peterson as an outsider to the Christian church that perhaps the Christian church has not been asking enough of its people. Young people especially are looking for a challenge, for this responsibility, for this call to adventure. And there's a sense in which Dr. Jordan Peterson has been coming in and filling that gap, perhaps sometimes left by the church. Now, of course, Christians know that an authentic Christianity encompasses both of these dimensions. We need the grace, we need the mercy of God, we need his enlivening forgiveness, but then in response to that, we live this out in the world by following Christ. This is the spiritual adventure, if you like, that he calls us to. And it's true that there could be a more robust vision of this in the world today, especially for people becoming Christians. So that's just a few of my reflections on this latest conversation between Bishop Robert Barron and Dr. Jordan Peterson. It'll be linked in the comments below and in the description below, I should say, and it really is worth listening or watching to in full. And I'll also link to the video I did from a couple years ago if you're interested in following this further. This is Kairos. My name is Joshua Pfeiffer. I'm a Lutheran pastor in South Australia, and it's been great to have you with us today. God bless you.